our meeting with. Thank you, Carrie. We would like to start our meeting as usual with our land acknowledgement. So the New Mexico Alliance of Health Councils humbly recognizes and acknowledges that we are on the unceded territory and the ancestral lands of the original peoples of New Mexico's Pueblos, Apache nations, and the Navajo Nation. Together, we acknowledge the history of genocide, dispossession, colonization, and ongoing systemic inequities, while strengthening and respecting our relationships with Indigenous peoples. We give thanks to the past, present, and future stewards of this land and respect all tribal nation sovereignty. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous resiliency, self-determination, and self-governance of New Mexico's tribes and nations who are still here today. So thank you for that. I'm going to stop sharing. Let Cheryl in. Today, we are going to hear from our Alliance staff members who've been working really, really hard in advocating for our health councils, our network at the session. And they are going to present an update at D-2, right? The session ends, Susan, tomorrow, I think at noon. So pretty much everything that's happened has happened. But I'm going to turn it over now to Susan and Geraldine and Val to introduce yourself and tell us what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy, and welcome everyone. We're so glad you're able to join us here today. And I am joined during this session, presenting this session with Geraldine Antonio, our tribal liaison, and Valeria Alarcon, our executive director. And I will give a brief overview and then hand it off to Geraldine, and we'll be spending some time. We really want to hear from you today. We're going to debrief, but so much about the debriefing is also hearing from you. So we definitely want you to engage and participate. This really is a discussion. We want to learn from you as much as you hearing from us. So I do want to start off. I am going to share my screen because it is very important that we acknowledge the fact that we cannot do this work alone. It takes a community, it takes a team. And we do want to honor our wonderful representatives and senator who helped really develop and push through the bill that was presented. It was House Bill 49, the County and Tribal Health Council Funding Act. And our gracious sponsor was Representative Anthony Ellison, and he was joined by co-sponsors Representative Thompson, Representative Johnson, and Senator Stefanik. So we thank them so much for their ongoing support for health councils, and we couldn't do our work without them. We also can't do our work without you. And we want to certainly thank everyone who was involved throughout the session. And those of you who've been with us for the past 12 months know that our work, our advocacy work, trying to get funding for health councils really began almost a year ago, where we knew that interim committees were being formed. We did a lot of education outreach and so forth. And many individuals as well as organizations were involved in these efforts. And I want to share these screens. I'll just pause for a minute. As you can see, the list of organizations who provided their support over the past year, because this is ongoing work. When you're doing advocacy work, you're in it for the long haul. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that during this session. So finally, here's some more. We did have well over 60 recognized organizations who not only provided letters of support, but who also reached out to their representatives and their senators and provided public testimony, made phone calls, made visits. So thank you, everyone who was so actively involved in the advocacy efforts. So where are we? So we're the day before the session actually closes, and we really worked hard to get that funding. Our funding request was we wanted to get the state to invest general funds at a level of $125,000 per health council, which would be recurring. We want that established in the DOH budget. And unfortunately, the news that I have is we were not as successful as we had hoped to be. So where it stands is currently what is in House Bill 2. So those of you who have been tracking it know that House Bill 2 was initially developed through the House Appropriations and Finance Committee. It went over to the Senate Finance Committee. They made changes, and then the Senate approved it. It went back to the House, and that's where it stands right now for final House approval. And what we, and it's not explicit in House Bill 2. So those of you that have a copy, you won't see a line item for health councils. It's actually embedded in general categories. But we did get confirmation from a member of the Legislative Council Services that the way it stands now is there is $644,000 for health councils for fiscal year 24 that begins in July 1st of 2023 through June of 2024. That totals a little bit over $15,000 per health council. And so we have our work cut out for us, and our work is not gone unnoticed, even though we didn't get everything that we were hoping for. We had such a presence during the past 6 months at interim committees during the session. And so we will continue to advocate for that funding. And also, I do want to mention about junior funds, so that $644,000 does go into the general budget. We also, as you know, it varies year by year. This year, there happens to be junior funds, which means that representatives and senators do have some discretionary funds. And unfortunately, we only had one senator that we know of that allocated junior funds to one specific health council, which is not as victorious as we were the previous year, where we had 6 representatives and senators. So we'll talk a little bit about the using junior funds, but overall, we're going to continue that fight to get funding for health councils up to $125,000 a year. And as I hand it off, if you have questions, please feel free to put that into the chat. I'll address that before I hand it off to Geraldine. But before I do that, I just want to share with everyone what our next steps look like. So as I share my screen, I'm going to, what we're looking at over the next 12 months, our advocacy efforts begins right away. We will certainly be debriefing on the session. We've already identified a very robust plan in terms of what that looks like. We're reaching out to some of our key champions who we've worked with throughout the session, and find out what can we do better, what where can we improve, because we are planning to continue this effort and hope to have another bill introduced next year. But our roadmap for advocacy really consists of 4 major strategies. One is what we call the executive budget. That's your state agencies in the governor's office are considered part of the executive branch. And it really starts off with that. So we want to do everything we can to make sure that health councils are in those budgets, because that is going to make our pathway so much easier if we know we have Department of Health behind us, if we know we have the governor behind us. So we start with really reaching out to the executive branch, and they develop their budgets, and usually it gets over to the governor's office sometime late summer, early fall. So we want to start those conversations early. Also, we have our legislative champions. We're going to debrief with a lot of our champions who have stood behind us, not only our bill sponsors and co-sponsors, but there was a whole cadre of other legislators who are supportive of health councils. We will, as the Alliance, reach out to them, but we encourage all the health councils and our partners to reach out to them as well. We depend heavily on our health councils. We are a network of health councils at the Alliance, but it's really you having those one-on-one conversations with your senators and your representatives that really make a difference. And now is the time to start those conversations, because once they're done with the session, they have a little bit of a break before interim committees start around June or July and really kick in come July. So use that time between now and July to reach out to your senators and representatives and have those one-on-one conversations with them and educate them about who you are, what you do, and why health councils are so important. And last but not least, in our strategy is continuing to build those partnerships, because the larger, stronger our voice, the better. So we shared with you 60 some organizations that were supportive. We want to see that those numbers grow, because it really is a large effort. And the more that legislators and the governor and Department of Health know about health councils, the better. So I will stop sharing there, and I'm just checking the chat to see if there are any specific questions, and I don't see any. So at this point, I will hand it off to Geraldine.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geraldine Antonio. If we haven't met, I'm the tribal liaison, and I've been working closely with Susan and Val here for the past, I would say since last year of April, and we've been working on the advocacy efforts, related to the Health Council funding and wanting to increase the traditional DOH funding and to make it reoccurring. And so I'm going to facilitate a discussion now and get some feedback from health councils. I think it's important that we kind of debrief and look at this session. And as Susan mentioned, we had some great recognition, and we had a lot of support, and health councils engage with the session. So, I think we can always find areas of improvement in the Alliance, especially in our role in supporting health councils with advocacy. The staff wants to hear more about, how we can do that better. And so I posted a Jamboard in the chat, and I know Val and I are going to tackle this here together. And so you could feel free to add some comments in the Jamboard, or you can feel free to unmute. We would love to hear from you. And so we'll be kind of debriefing on 4 different areas related to the advocacy that we have been doing. The first one is going to be around the advocacy series training that we did. And so that was done with a contractor. And so I will share my screen now. Let's see. And if you hear a little kiddo in the back, that's my 2-year-old. So the first topic is the advocacy series training. And so I have a list here of all of the series of the trainings that we've done. The first one kind of just being an overview of advocating for health councils. The next session was storytelling. The next one after was a policy, looking at policy at the local, state, tribal, and federal level. Community and relational organizing, and the last two were around developing a policy campaign, part 1 with a SWOT analysis and part 2 with power mapping. The second one was around toolkits and advocacy resources. I know the Alliance has been sharing this, and we have a resource page dedicated to this on our website. The third one is around junior bill funding. And the last one is around communications. I know we've been sending updates and reminders. So kind of coming back to advocacy series and trainings, you know, kind of just getting some feedback. And if anyone wants to unmute or add to the Jamboard, but we would love to hear what worked well with the series. Was it helpful? Was there a specific training that stood out to your health council or any of your members? And were the recordings and materials helpful that we listed on the website? Were they helpful for you and kind of going back and reviewing them? Or you can just let us know if you didn't have time to review or attend any of the trainings.
Carolyn, perhaps people might have a suggestion as to what they don't see on the list and would like to see on the list.
Yeah, we would love to hear that too. So these are the topics here that we had as part of the advocacy series trainings. And so they were just about some were an hour, I believe, some were an hour and a half, just depending. But yes, these kind of took over a series starting I think just late 2022 and then kind of ending here in 2023 before the session started. So I'll just check the chat, but if anyone has any comments or any any suggestions, anything that you thought was, you know, worked well for you with the series or trainings, or if you have any recommendations on what didn't work. And I do see Val's hand.
Yes, hi everyone. So happy to be here with all of you today. Geraldine, thank you for facilitating this discussion, this dialogue. One of the things that stands out to me was the advocacy training during our statewide meeting. And so I know that was a recent training, and perhaps folks, you know, have an opportunity to reflect on that and see how that training landed with you. If it was informative, supportive. I heard some great reviews the day of as we were at the roundhouse getting ready for testimony. So I just sort of wanted to offer that. And I see Shay. Hi, Shay. Good to have you here. Do you want to share with folks?
Yeah, well, the storytelling session actually taught me quite a bit to begin with. However, at the state conference, that elevator pitch training really solidified what the storytelling had just alluded to, kind of. And it really solidified it for me, and that was a huge help.
And Shay, if you don't mind me asking, you mentioned the elevator pitch. Did you at any point get a chance to be able to use that with a legislator or an elected official?
I did use it with Representative Armstrong. And that was unfortunately the only one I was able to get a hold of, but I did use it. And it did seem to be effective. Of course, we already had her support, but
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing, Shay. And I do see another one here. As a new health council coordinator, the trainings were helpful in getting more familiar with the importance of health council funding. Does anybody have anything to add in addition to that? Because I think that's important. It was kind of the key messaging of this year's the advocacy. So, you know, we're always looking for more funding for health councils, and it's so important. I think tying it to the bigger role in our public health state's infrastructure, and also to carry out the functions of House Bill 137. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's like we have so many admin costs, and in addition to that, to carry out the actual functions itself is very costly. So anything else in the chat? Oh, sorry. Hi, Ken, welcome. And so any other thoughts on maybe something that didn't work? Do you see a topic on our series that you think that we could have offered? Did you like the format, the way it was offered, or yeah, any thoughts on that from health councils? So all the topics were good. Did you feel like there was anything specific that you thought we could, you know, focus more on? Maybe, you know, someone mentioned there were a new health council coordinator. So would it have been maybe helpful to look at the history of health councils and maybe the importance of advocacy, the history of underfunding? I mean, that was something I was thinking about too, as we kind of did this series is, you know, for those who are new to the work and those hired on through the grant, how much they really know about the history of underfunding. So if there are no comments, I can move on to the next one. Sorry.
I have can you hear me? This is Anna. Hello, everyone. I was wondering, are you going to be offering this training again, like to prepare for next year? Because I would love to get more community members to participate. At least for McKinley, yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, I remember the coordinators used to get at least over 70,000 in the early 2000s. So that's about almost half of what we were asking for.
Mm-hmm.
Could I
Right.
just follow up?
Yeah, it wasn't even that was underfunded, but you know, at least 70 grand was good to keep a coordinator on, like Ophelia Hudson.
Yes, thank you, Anna. I did mention here to a recommendation is to continue those trainings next year. And so I think that also is part of the Alliance's plan is that we continue to do this year round and offer the same series. And I think there is a lot of other health councils who are in support of what you said. I mean, Enrique also said suggesting 75K as a minimum. And so I know that during our advocacy efforts, we had asked for 125,000. And then if there were any further discussion, we were also open to the idea of if they were willing to go lower than that, but still ensuring that it was at least, if I can remember, Susan, at least 75,000, right? Yes. Yeah, so those were some options that we discussed with legislators and kept it open. And so I am seeing some things pop in here. One thing that someone liked as well is including practice time in the workshops. And I do see Val and Jessica's hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Geraldine. Hi, team again. In reflecting to what Shay shared about the storytelling and how it really became the elevator pitch became more solidified. So going through that sort of succession of storytelling into the elevator pitch training, and perhaps providing that training earlier on this year, looking at that roadmap that Susan presented in conjunction with advocacy training, bringing some of those training topics earlier on, and as a way to build awareness, confidence, all of that. And the other piece that I think it's critical to conveying a strong message back to what Geraldine was saying about funding, right? Why it's a critical need for adequate funding, showing what's feasible when health councils have adequate funding, the level of reach or quality or of impact, so on and so forth. What is feasible with adequate funding versus obviously, what lacks as a result of underfunding, and sort of providing that, comparison and that history, which I think, Geraldine, you had a really great visual aid of going back to 2000, mid 2000s to date, where the funding was optimal, where it completely dropped. So that comparative analysis, I think, for legislators from that perspective of qualitative analysis can emphasize the critical need for adequate funding. And we see Anna here with a comment in the chat. Are certificates issued for professional development?
After these trainings, yeah.
And I can address that. Anna, we can just issue a generic professional development training. We would have to figure out on the backside, make sure people are registered, they stick through the whole training. But in order for those certificates to often have meaning, they are used toward any governing board or agency or an existing certification which requires continuing education CEUs. And so feel free to reach out to staff and we can have further discussions in terms of any individual needs or overall, because it's certainly something Val and the staff have discussed.
Absolutely. I would just echo what Susan highlighted, also from a workforce development strategy, right? So that by having these educational credit units in a formalized certification training program, it creates a career pathway, it creates an educational pathway for workforce development within this sector. So that's definitely something that's top of my heart and our priority list. So thank you for that feedback.
I do see Jessica's hand up now.
Sure, I will partly wanted to echo what Val and a couple of others have said. If some of these trainings could be held earlier in January. I'm new to my role, new to Los Alamos County and learning all of this. By the time, after I attended the training, worked on the elevator pitch and on our junior bill funding requests, by the time I reached out to Representative Armstrong, I was told it had all already been allocated, like there wasn't any junior bill funding left. But I will say I had to go through my own process here, like up to community services and then county manager and council. So like there was already a month-and-a-half process before I could take it out, if that makes sense. So I just wanted like both earlier and then also maybe figuring out messages for different audiences would also be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I noted here to host trainings in January. And so I know we're going to have some time to also talk about junior bill funding. And so if you want to share just a little bit more too, we can also be sure to kind of circle back to you with that. And I do see just a bit more. I'll just hit a few of these points and then we can go on to the next one. So looks like some things that did work mentioned audience specific messaging, or maybe that's something that we need to work on. So and I do see here learning about the history of Health Council funding would be great. I think to also Val and some of those who spoke to their point about understanding the basis for the funding recommendation. So the history and what is the current cost of doing the work. And so kind of that's what I see for our advocacy series right now. And also Christopher Hudson mentioned a better focus on the executive office this year because they're not having that support was a hindrance this year. So that there is fully noted. I do agree here right at the end. And so if everyone's okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. And this here is where we'll focus. I know that the first part was about trainings. This next part here is about the toolkits and the resources. So this here comprised of the 1-pager and the 8-page advocacy recommendations. We had also provided talking points that could be by phone or email, or if you were going to write a letter, we provided templates for those. How to find your representative and senator. And we had a list of our upcoming trainings and previous trainings, all recorded materials and all recordings and materials available to download. And I know they were available on our Alliance's YouTube. So any thoughts on this here? At least if this worked for you, and if you found any of the toolkits or resources helpful during the session. And also Val noted these were shared, these call to action emails, they were shared and they were also on the website. So does anyone remember getting having an overview of the toolkits? Did anyone use the toolkits? And does anyone have, does one of the other resources work more for others than it did? So I'm just going to open the floor now if anyone has any thoughts on that. Okay, and I do see Susan's chat here, the 1-page and 8-pager. They were available with House Bill 49 listed, and then some mentioned without House Bill 49 for those who were not able to advocate for a specific bill.
Geraldine, while we're waiting for folks to compile their thoughts around this, I will say early on, Val and I and many of the health councils and the staff, including you, Geraldine, we were reaching out, and personally, I always had copies of that 1-page and that 8-page with me. I've gotten really positive feedback from the legislators that I shared it with, and they found it very helpful. Some of them don't like going through 8 pages, but if you have more time, it really provided a lot of really concrete talking points for me presenting the information. But it's always great to leave that 1-pager with the people I was talking to. So personally, I found it really valuable, and I also got positive feedback.
Yes, and I would echo Susan, having spent quite a bit of time at the Roundhouse during this legislative session. Definitely positive feedback. I also, for those who legislators who I didn't get at the beginning, get to reach them in their office, I would always leave the 1-pager and I would highlight in orange sort of like the key elements of, HB 49 adequate funding, the 5.7 mil, like, and what the sort of indicators for it are, which were in the bullet points, right? And circle the reach during the pandemic when with all the work that you all did with equity vaccine events. And so it does help on a number of efforts, both talking points, as Susan mentioned, as a way to continuously engage these legislators. So it's something that they see over and over again with your personalized message. Like I would leave personalized messages on the fold it in half, put the personalized message on the back so that they would see it right away. So it was, great to hear from you as to these toolkits and resources, how helpful they were, how easy they were to follow, relevant, where we can improve. I know that we throughout the months of January, February, we sent quite a bit of call to action emails. And so the frequency of those, I know it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And of course, we're all in it together, mobilizing and making sure our voices are being heard on behalf of health councils and the ask, right, advocacy on adequate funding. But just would love your feedback as to what really worked and what didn't. Thank you, team.
Thanks, Val. And I do see here we've got a few comments. Someone liked the talking points because it was helpful, especially being new to having conversations with the elected officials. Someone mentioned the recordings and materials being available at a later date was very helpful, especially if you couldn't make it to the original training. So, and then another person noted again, talking points with community leaders is very helpful. And Shay echoed again, very thankful for the recordings. So we do know that having the materials available and you can always kind of return back to it at a later date, but also sharing the link and materials with your health council members and your partners and those who are on your health council list and rosters and other statewide partners too, is to continue to share the advocacy work. I mean, the training's available for everyone statewide, which includes health councils. And another echo to the remarks about recordings and information. So I think that really worked well for us this year. Any thoughts on the 1-pager, the 8-pager? Do you felt like that was, I know we got 1-pager feedback on that with the talking points, but any thoughts on our 8-pager recommendations? I know it was very detailed and provided some history, like we mentioned, kind of breaking down some of the numbers, but I also found that to be really helpful, especially kind of if we wanted to read into a little bit more of the historical context behind it. And the graphs on there as well, the infographics. I think nowadays we prefer to look at graphs and some things that we don't have to read as much. So I know there's plenty of that on our 8-pager as well. So if will kind of move now into what didn't work. Any recommendations on the toolkits? Is there something you felt like the Alliance didn't provide, a specific resource or something that maybe you needed help with, but just didn't know where to find it? Okay, I don't hear anybody. So maybe our toolkits was something that, we seem like to have a lot of good feedback from it. So
Geraldine, I just have one suggestion, maybe something I could have used is a calendar or a schedule when when the committee meetings were happening and maybe when there are other sorts of events. Maybe we could even schedule when legislators have open houses. I don't know if they do, but important events where we could connect with our champions.
awesome. Okay, thanks, Wendy. And Shay also seconds that. So I did add it here. And I think a lot of our call to actions included this information, but I
Mhm.
get what you mean is having it ahead of time so we can plan and I do see Val's hand.
Yeah, absolutely. As much advance notice as we can get with, for legislators' office hours or the legislative interim committee, and when those meetings happen. I have found that when it comes to committee meetings during the legislation, and you, Geraldine, and I both, and Susan know this very intimately, and others, it's like less than 24-hour notice at times, and that's really challenging. And I get that is challenging for everybody, and just I think being cognizant that those are the conditions of the session, that we can be available in the moment's notice, because that's just the nature of that world, as much as possible, of course. But absolutely, having that that calendar as part of our advocacy roadmap that will be part of that. Thank you.
I do have a follow-up to that on that note with sometimes like very a late notice on committee meetings, but I know health councils were engaged either in person or virtually. But does anybody have any feedback or any sharing your experience with that? Because I know the Alliance tried to get out that information as soon as possible. And so, I don't know if it caused any delay in your part getting on or any issues, but if anyone has any thoughts on that too, please feel free to share. Okay, so if I'm gonna actually move one of these here around. And how am I doing on time, Val? So that way I know you have time to do your update.
Yeah, I think this is important too, another like 5 minutes,
Okay.
because I think we still have some more
Yes.
captions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next one we're gonna do kind of talking about, we did series trainings and then the toolkits and resources. The next thing is communications. And so we did call to actions, we sent out emails, we were doing one-on-one phone calls with health councils. And so emailing health councils within certain committee areas, committee members and their legislators. And so any thoughts on what worked well and what didn't? And I do see Chris's hand. Hey, Chris, I do see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get to the mute button. I just had a comment on the last one on the toolkits and stuff. I was just thinking, it'd be nice to have toolkits maybe a little more specific. How we were saying we had the 1-pager and the 8-pager, and how some people didn't like the 8-pager and some people like the 1-pager. It might be helpful to have the toolkits oriented for the person that's utilizing the toolkit. Say, you have a community member, so you give them the community member packet, and it tells them, you're a community member. These are the important things to know. These are probably what we would like you to know, and and then have like a legislator one, and have like a toolkit for legislators and a toolkit for health council coordinators. So that way each person is given the appropriate amount of information without being overwhelmed. Because I think sometimes when we're looking at the toolkits, and that's always my gripe with toolkits, is that some of the information isn't as pertinent to me as a coordinator or as a community member or as a person. Like sometimes I'll get them from other campaigns and be like, this is more oriented to talk to a legislator, not to a community member. I know what they're after, but I don't know why they're after it in my community. And that might be some of the confusion too. But yeah, on the toolkits, I think it was a really good job. I think everyone did a really good job. I think we just hit a lot of headway, I guess you would say. We needed more help from the executive office, definitely from the Secretary of Health, but it doesn't help that, our Secretary of Health is interim or, back and forth, and we don't have a stable one person. Maybe that's how it's designed. Maybe that's why they want it that way. I'm not too sure. Anyways, I was wanted to talk about the toolkit, but I'm going off on other stuff now.
No, thank you, Chris. We always appreciate your feedback. So yes, I've noted that on the previous slide, and also, and we do see some here in the chat echoing they liked your idea. It's tailoring it to, you know, who we're presenting the information to. And I do see some comments here about the communication was well informed, and updates in real time.
Oh, and then one other thing too, I think is just helpful too, is that, you know, we don't get a lot of time with these legislators or with our community members in figuring this out. But mainly with the legislators, it would be helpful to maybe start early like we do in the summer, not only with the interim meeting to do the presentation with the Alliance to Health Councils and everything that we do, but it'd be helpful for coordinators to check in with their decision makers, maybe like once a month. Like this month you check in with your representatives, and then next month you check in with your senators, and you make it like maybe not monthly, because monthly seems like a little cumbersome, but maybe like bi-monthly or quarterly, you know, like every 3 months, be like, hey, Senator Munoz, I just wanted to talk to you because, you know, this is what we're working on in our community. And just so you know, we have a bill that's coming up and da 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 da. For a lot of legislators, they do have a lot more time during the off season, during the non-session season, to actually elucidate and talk about problems in the community and work on things. So that might be a better time to actually communicate what health councils do. I know this past year, you know, we were just kind of putting it together, but now that we have more together, maybe it might be easier to share. Maybe that was also an obstacle too, is that not enough legislators knew certain things about it.
Yes, thank you, Chris. Fully noted. Yeah, I think it's important. And I know our timeline for the work that we're going to do is going to start, I think, right in April. Is that right, Susan Val? So that's
correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and starting with conversations with DOH. I had a brief meeting with Patrick Allen in early February before he went on vacay. So we'll be circling back with him and senior staff in April to, you know, work, enlist their partnership on this as well and support.
Awesome. And so just one more thing on communications, because I know we're just a little bit limited on time, but you know, we started the session and sending out communications and seeing more. I think it's open rate, like open click rate for emails or, you know, things being sent out by the Alliance, and noticing it kind of dwindling as we kind of went through the legislative session. So to that point, just, you know, if anybody has any recommendations on the communications and maybe if you're seeing maybe want to make recommendations or suggestions on the timeline or how often things are being sent out or what exactly is being sent out, we would love to hear feedback on that as well. Just to ensure that nothing's being skipped over and that you're able to get the information that you need to be able to take action. Because again, like some things are so late notice that we do our best to update health councils and also do call to actions as well. So if anybody has any comments, I could take them and then I could give Val also some time. And so also don't feel like you just need to share everything here. If you want to send us emails or anything specific to Val and I, we could definitely collect that by email as well. Phone calls as well. And you can talk about your experience with the advocacy and, you know, share any recommendations or any positive experiences too as well. So I don't see anything in the chat, and if it's okay, I know the last slide we talked about was the junior bill funding. And so I know Susan mentioned last year we had a little bit more success with 6 health councils receiving junior bill funding. This year, just 1. And so very quickly, I know Jessica had just started about sharing her experience with the junior bill funding. and maybe the timeline and when, we started hosting the trainings and hearing back from legislators, but also the internal process that she has specific with her health council. Does anybody have any thoughts on the junior bill funding, on the training itself, the way it was delivered?
And if I can add a quick comment, junior funding is not available every year. It happens year by year, and sometimes we don't even know if it's going to be available until the session starts. I just wanted to make people aware of that. So, but it would never hurt to have it ahead of time in case there is junior funding. But junior funding is not guaranteed.
And I am just adding Jessica's comment about hosting the trainings in January. Anyone else have any thoughts on the junior bill funding, the training, the materials? Any thoughts related to that? Okay. Well, I'm not hearing much, so if again, feel free to email Val or myself. We can follow up on any of these topic areas, but thank you so much for sharing and your, giving suggestions and recommendations on this year's legislative session. And so I'm going to kick it off to Val now, and she's going to have a few updates here.
Thank you, Geraldine. And I'm going to do a little screen share, my friends. Can you all see that? Oh, I see Chris's hand is up. Go ahead, Chris.
I think it was just left up, but I was also going to say on the junior funding bill, it's helpful to remind legislators that the junior field funding should go to all health councils. It shouldn't just go to like single health councils. And that's my main problem with junior bill funding, is that it's a run on money for individuals or programs, and us as an alliance and as a state organization and state agency, we shouldn't have to get individual piecemeals for those pieces. So if we get funding from junior bill, I always ask for funding for all health councils, not just the one health council. But if it's a problem of the Rio Grande sector getting more money than Northwest or Southeast, then we really need to look at that more particularly and understand why the Rio Grande corridor makes more money as health councils do than the Northwest, and figure out a way to fix that. Because the way that the junior funding bill, it just puts us against each other and against other programs within the state that we know they need funding. We need them during legislative season, and it hurts camaraderie, and it hurts the state more the more we have to compete with each other for the same pot of money.
I would definitely, thank you, Chris. I would definitely echo that, because having that strategy of being a unified voice with a unified, advocacy effort with relation to the junior funding, really positions the health councils as a critical partner and obviously mechanism in addressing public health priorities and advancing health equity across the state. So that's something that we will definitely work on, Chris, for this upcoming year, making sure that it's a unified, voice from that
if we're all
junior.
going to go out for junior funding, then maybe just everyone requests $1,000. Request the bare minimum, say that goes to all health councils.
Exactly.
And, $52,000 for every year. But yeah, the way that it's set up right now is very competitive and very, we need the money, but I don't want to compete against you guys just to get it. We'll find pots other ways.
Exactly. Enrique says we need to stick together. Yes, I would definitely echo that. Thank you so much. Yes, agree. Thank you, Jessica. So I'm going to give my commitment within the wheelhouse of priorities in service of our health councils is to leverage you all for success. And of course, funding is one of the many things at the heart of what is needed to leverage you all for success. And within the strategies of fundraising efforts, my commitment is to, within the Alliance, in support of all of you, is to diversify our funding efforts. And coming from a more of a social health equity investment, a strategy, and also internally, I know we have lots of data that we can really distill and create sort of a portfolio of our impact, right? Our metrics, our social return on investment, or health return on investment. I know we've had partners like UNM and Egan who have done some work around, return on investment. I think there's lots of opportunities here as well that also feed into our diversifying fundraising efforts. And I just want to quickly, in these next couple of minutes, go over some of the strategies that I am, considering to propose and have all of you provide your input, and have a very clear, fundraising action plan for this year for diversifying our resources to support health councils. So essentially having a health council, health equity investment portfolio that are specific to your needs within your communities, right? There's some things that are very much, overarching across all health councils, but every community is facing different needs. Every health council is facing different needs and priorities. So of course, online fundraising in and around donation strategies via the website. Crowdfunding is another way to reach a broader audience. Fundraising events, some of which here in New Mexico, I've learned golf tournaments tend to turn a lot of people out in support of a specific priority in a community. There's lots of different types of events that we together can identify that are relevant to health councils, with what kind of unifying message that it becomes also a trend every year, an annual fundraising event. And I've seen a significant return on this particular effort. Corporate partnership, I've done this particularly with the early child education sector, really identify who the corporate partners are within each region or within that state to essentially sponsor, in this case would be a health council, to fund, and it would be reoccurring funds each year to support a specific priority for that health council. Some are very program driven, other can be capacity building, others can be, general operating funds, so on and so forth. Plan given is another avenue strategy that can also help us maintain consistency with fundraising efforts in and around legacy gift programming, so on and so forth. And major gifts that also include endowments. These are more personalized appeals and, stewardship, cultivation and development. With endowments, there are other, sort of financial tax criterion that needs to be taken into consideration, but that's also a very promising avenue. And of course, grants, right? That we are very much committed internally with the team and with health councils to research, identify, and submit for. And Wendy and Susan and Geraldine and others have been stellar and deeply dedicated to researching and allocating what are those grant funding sources. So these are sort of 6 strategies that I've been looking into for the Alliance, for leveraging our health councils across the state. And of course, as we formulate a strategic action plan, reflecting that back to all of you for your input, feedback, recommendations will be critical before we launch into these effort of diversifying fundraising. So with that, I will conclude, because I know we're over a minute, and open it up for any questions or reflections. And I see Chris has a comment. We have thought of creating public health fund through the state. Yes, a place for funding for councils and investing in public health. Absolutely, Chris. And we'll capture that as well. Any other, or if you want to speak a little bit more to that, Chris, you're welcome to, or any others who would like to.
Yeah, so we worked on the Medicaid forward bill, and that passed luckily on the Senate and everything, but it originally started with the Healthcare Affordability Fund. So that was created to help those uninsured and fill those needs through the superintendent's office. And I've heard of other funds sort of like the state general fund, and then we have the education fund and the permanent land grant fund. But it's up to legislators to prepare a fund if they want to. And if we were able to utilize that for health councils, it could be distributed a lot more equitably than what the state makes us do in running these circles and going through junior funding and going through the Department of Health and all these budgets. But with that fund, it would be easier to distribute and to reinvest into the fund. Say a health council doesn't need the funding that year, maybe that year, they got a big old grant from Kellogg to cover all of their funding as well as their project fees. And then that year, the funding that they get from the state can just go back into the fund and revert without being too much of an issue. I don't know if that's an issue now, if any of our health councils ever turn down money and if that just disappears or anything. But I always, if we're able to control our own funding and it's regenerating on its own, then it would help to mitigate that asking from the state all the time for money. Because eventually, even after we get funding for this, we'll still hit that $75,000 for the coordinator, but then we're going to have staffing issues and things like that. Just like any company, any corporation, any entity is bound to grow, and that's what we want, of course. But with that growth, we'll require more funding. So in the end, I think we'll still be back at square one of going back to legislators in 4, 10, 15 years saying, oh, we don't have enough funding. When we first asked for funding, we didn't ask for, enough to cover these other costs. We were just trying to get back on our feet. So I don't see the problem of funding going away anytime soon. But a way to maybe think about that is where can we generate funds that can help with that, but also, help keep public health afloat. You know what I mean? How can it be regenerative in that main way too? Just thinking.
Thank you. And I see our friend Marianne's got her hand up. Go ahead, Marianne.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I've been so sick. I might have missed it, but I wanted to know, did we ever find out, you remember during the conference in Santa Fe, when the gentleman from DOH came in and he said, I believe it was Roberto who said that the Kellogg grant was going to be renewed for another $50,000 for each health council. Did that happen?
Yes, it did. We got confirmation that CDC, and it was not Kellogg, it's the CDC portion of that funding. And he did get formal confirmation that they did approve the no cost extension.
Because, Sandoval County Health Council believes that we did not.
Let us know what we can do to relieve their and to get that information out. And that might be something Val and Geraldine, we follow up with Roberto. Maybe he could put out an official notice and let the health councils know what the next steps are. Because we will have to renegotiate the scopes of work for year 3 for health councils via CHI.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that clarification. I'll let them know.
Okay, making some notes here. Awesome. Thank you. And I know we're 6 minutes past the hour, but if there are any, thank you, Jessica. We got your message. Any input overall in this update today or recommendations? And of course, always welcome to email us as well.
Val, and also Carrie and I talked about it. We're going to also send out the Jamboard in an announcement. So feel free to still add comments or recommendations, and feel free to email us too as well. So we're still open to one-on-one conversations and Zoom.
I just want to make a comment. I just want to thank you ladies for just being out there and representing our communities, giving us the resources that we need. You guys are amazing. And I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do for our communities.
Thank you. We see Chris hands up.
Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to reiterate the thanks too. Thank you so much to the staff, to Susan coming aboard as the interim, to Geraldine and all the interns for all the work you did. It was amazing to see all the work that you guys all got together. It was amazing to see the teamwork that you guys all had with Valerie too as well. Thank you, Val, for coming on as our new executive director. To all our new board members, we're excited to have you and move forward on everything for the Alliance of Health Councils. You know, I think this year has been really great for a lot of us in being able to reimagine or restructure how we work, but also, you know, just kind of rebuild those relationships that haven't been there for a while. If anything, we got that out of this. I know it's a hard push in any campaign for funding or for just across the state. So my advice is, you know, just stick with it, and we're getting there. And I'm really excited about it all. I just, you know, next year, hopefully we'll get a little bit more.
Thank you, Chris. It's going to take all of us, and we're in it together, working together towards the same goal and our unified vision and messaging. So looking forward to this next cycle and partnering with all of you. And thank you. Back to you, Wendy. I
Okay.
know you were leading the.
Well, thank you all for coming and joining us in this. This was a great discussion. The Jamboard's going out. There'll be notes and recording of this session available. We heard how important recordings are. We're recording these also. So if you know someone who missed it, tell them to listen to the recording, respond to the Jamboard, and let's go forward together. Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.